What's up, guys? So as we head into our Black Friday sale, we get really busy and our sales guy gets a slew of questions. So that got me thinking. I said, hey, give me your top questions that you typically get and let's make a video of it and let's answer some of those. So let's jump right into it. The first question that we get very commonly is, what is droop? And that's crazy. This is like one of the most important things I feel like in a coilover kit that could be adjusted for. And it's one of the most commonly overlooked things. Droop, essentially, it's the amount of distance your wheels will droop out when the vehicle is lifted up off the ground. Why is that important? Well, if you have too much droop, your wheels droop out too much after it's lifted off the ground, that probably means you don't have very much compression travel left over at static ride height, which means if you hit a sizable bump, you're probably blowing into the bump stop and the ride is extremely harsh. Now, if you don't have enough droop, means that your car will literally feel like it's topping out after every single bump that you hit, which will yield to terrible ride quality. So how can you adjust for that? Well, the spring preload can be adjusted to increase or decrease droop. And I'm not gonna dive into the mechanics of how to do that, how to calculate that, because that's worthy of its own video, and we'll probably dive into that sometime in the future. But you can visit our web store and go to the technology and features link. There's actually a guide of how to adjust for droop. There's also an article if you want to read a little bit more about it in the technical articles section of our website. One of the other questions that we commonly get is, when are helper springs actually needed? Some coilover kits have them by default, some don't. Well, a helper spring is essentially needed when you don't get enough droop out of the suspension system. And there's a reason why you might not be getting enough droop out of the suspension system. It's either because the spring rate's very high or the car is very lightweight. And with the weight of the car acting on the spring, it's just not compressing enough. Therefore, it will not droop out as you lift the car up off the ground. Let me give you an example. Say you have a car that has 700 pounds on each corner, and we're gonna install a 700-pound spring that has no motion ratio on each corner. So when you put the car on the ground, the car's gonna compress 1 inch. 700 pounds per inch is the rating of the spring. Each corner weighs 700 pounds, so it's gonna compress only 1 inch. Well, 1 inch of compression when you have a total of 4 inches of travel, that's not enough. We typically shoot for about 35% of total travel to be consumed by droop. You're only consuming about 25% if you're compressing only 1 inch. This is where if you add a helper spring to the system, you could get more compression, aka more droop statically. So helper springs are very essential and needed for instances where the spring rate's very high or the car is very light, just like in the example I gave you. Another popular question is, what is better, a true coilover or the shock and spring divorced? Well, this is very common on some applications where the existence of either or is a possibility, and we do sell either or for those applications. Honestly, there's not really a right or wrong option here. One important thing to consider if you're choosing either a true coilover or shock and spring divorce is that when the spring and the shock are separated from one another, typically the spring has a much higher motion ratio acting on it than when it would be installed directly on the shock being a true coilover. So you just have to be mindful or work with a suspension company that can do the math for you and select the correct spring rate to yield the same rate at the wheel if it's divorce, shock from spring, or if it's a true coilover all-in-one. The true coilover has some benefits in a motorsport application. I find that it's a lot easier to adjust preload and ride height on the go in a motorsports application when it's a true coilover. So there's instances where you may want to consider a true coilover if it's going on a race car. Next question, what are radial bearing spring seats and what do they do? We sell top spring seats that have a bearing integrated into the spring seat itself. That allows the spring seat to rotate absolutely freely. When a coil spring compresses, it actually twists as well. And to allow it to freely twist, we incorporate this bearing into the upper spring seat. So what this really does is allows the spring to react a little bit faster and move freely. Some other cool applications for this radial bearing upgrade are McPherson's cars. The radial bearing, when used in a McPherson application, really sometimes helps out decreasing the chances of an audible spring bind. When you turn the steering wheel back and forth, the whole spring and shock unit move together, and now you're literally allowing the spring and the shock to move independent of one another. No friction, no audible noise. Can I purchase new front lower mounts for my coilovers? Absolutely, we do sell every product for the most part for the coilovers. This is a very common question because a lot of Subaru customers that have a base model WRX want to convert to an STI drivetrain they end up putting bigger brakes, bigger bearings, which make it so that you have to change the shock lower mount to accept those new upgraded parts. And yes, those are totally available by themselves. Shoot us an email if you want to purchase some lower mounts. Where should I set my damping settings? Well, all of our coilover kits come with the damping settings set in the middle because we designed the shocks to have a good range of adjustment, but they're set up in a way where you can't really go wrong. You explore the full spectrum of adjustability. They're valves specifically for your vehicle, for the spring rate that we designed the coilover kit for. I'd say if you want to go for a very spirited drive or a track day, go ahead and venture to the stiffer settings. You know, go only 5 to 10 clicks out for full stiff. That should do the job for a track day. If you are just in the mood to have a really, really nice, comfortable ride, go ahead and explore the 20 to 25 clicks out from full stiff. Bottom line is when you buy Feal coilovers, they're designed for your vehicle, for the spring rate, so you can set them to any part of the damping settings that we built in, and the shock will work appropriately, but the middle setting is the perfect one to start with. What are the advantages of the Pro Long Stroke kit? This kit is endemic to drifting. I developed this kit through drifting. I noticed that as drift cars got faster, more aggressive, tires got grippier, the tracks didn't get any smoother. So I found that it's really important to have enough suspension compression so you're not getting into the bump stops. It's also important to have enough droop so that way as you're transitioning, as you're digging it out of a turn, the front wheels have a chance to get back on the ground and give you that control that you need as a driver. The Pro Long Stroke kits have more stroke. The spring rates and the valving are geared towards professional or at least high competitive drifting. If you're building a competitive drift car, consider the Pro Long Stroke kit. What separates Feal from the competition? That's kind of a tough question, and there's so many ways I could answer that. I'm gonna reposition that question, and I'm honestly gonna put myself in the consumer shoes. And if I was the consumer, a well-educated consumer on suspension, I would ask several questions to understand if this is a right suspension company for me. What is the firmness balance of front to rear? How balanced will the car feel? Is it gonna understeer, oversteer? What is the approximate shock stroke, front and rear, of the coilover kit that I will be getting for my application? Can you guide me how to set droop after I install the coilover kit? Is there someone I could talk to on the phone or via email that could help me through some of the technical setup? And can I rebuild and or revalve my coilovers or convert them to two-way or three-way after I install them, after I run them, and the plans for my vehicle change? Is that even a possibility? Bottom line, I truly believe that we're one of the few brands that really focuses on the performance, on the engineering, and we're able to engage in these conversations with you because we're hands-on building and designing the shocks. I'm not only putting myself in the shoes of a consumer, I am a consumer of my own coilover kits. I compete on my own coilovers, I drive on my own coilovers, and I take it personal if I don't like the way something works on the coilover. I go back to the drawing board and redesign and retest. I truly believe that is what sets us apart from the rest. Well, thank you guys for watching. I encourage you guys to comment below with your own questions. These are common questions I asked our sales guy to provide me so I could answer them for you, but you might have very cool questions that are worthy of its own YouTube video, and some of the questions went over, I think, are worthy of a video on their own as well. So I look forward to reading your comments and coming up with more cool videos for you.